Welcome to the Quantum Bridge show again with myself, Gary, and my co-host, Casper. We have a new guest with us today that I will hand over to Casper. He'll be able to introduce her for us.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Quantum Bridge, and welcome to Sinead as well. Hi, Sinead.
Hello.
Sinead's our guest for today. We're very pleased to have Sinead joining us, and she's going to talk with us about the importance of play, and also why the absence of play is or can be so negative. So without further ado, Sinead, maybe you can give a quick intro to yourself and start touching on that whole area of play, which I think will then bring up a series of questions for Gary and myself that I'm sure you can play with.
Like it. Well, thank you guys. I very much appreciate you having me on here. And yeah, so a little bit about me. For quite a chunk of life, I definitely wasn't playing. Obviously in early life I was. Career-wise, I moved into the corporate world quite early on. So around about 18, I think I was in corporate, but working before that. And yeah, there was definitely an absence of play there, but quite honestly, I didn't even know what it was that I was missing. I just knew I was missing something very important in the very serious, somewhat meaningless world of corporate. But yeah, so I worked in corporate for 15 years. Long story short, like perhaps a lot of people, crashed and burned. And it was in the recovery of that. So the recovery of being a corporate employee, of trying to work out and feel and navigate my way in a way that was better for me. That initially started with movement. So some people would call it exercise. I don't even like that word. I feel like, ironically, it's got no play to it. Movement to me is, well, I think it's the ethos of being human. It's always about moving, but there is play involved in movement, where there is a bit of an absence of play in exercise. It feels like something you have to do rather than you want to do. So in doing that, in discovering kind of how powerful movement was for me in coming out of that hole of depression, I was picking up on this feeling, but I didn't know what it was until I went to Thailand to learn Muay Thai. And it was this kind of profound shift where I was watching a Muay Thai fighter, which may seem like a strange place to see play. But he was like one of the best fighters I've seen. He was best in the province, but he just had this essence that I was picking up on and watching and observing. And then suddenly it clicked. I was like, oh my God, he's playful. So it wasn't just his actions, it was his attitude and his approach to not just fighting, but to his way of life outside that he brought into the ring. And no one could see or work out where he was coming from, because he was playful, and it just clicked with me, the importance of play in many aspects. And then I was seeing it more in Thailand in itself. There was an essence of play with the Thai people, and that was it. That's what I realized. It's like, oh my God, that's what I'm missing, and that's probably more so the West is missing, is this essence and element of play. And then the search began of how to incorporate play more into my life, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And that's kind of brought me up to today. Gone through lots of different transitions, from being a personal trainer to wellness coach, incorporating breath work and all of these different modalities, but always trying to keep the essence and element of play to fuse into how I live my own life and how I work with clients. So that's basically what's brought me to today. And now living in Mexico, where I'm, get to play on the beach and play with some very freedom lover people here. So yeah.
Absolutely. Sinead, can I just ask, in terms of that sort of timeline, and thank you for condensing it, because I think there are things that are really good for us to focus on today, and we can maybe another time go back and look in more depth at where that genesis all came from. But in terms of the timeline from seeing the Muay Thai fighter, the Thai fighter, and then and to where you are now? Are we talking a couple of years, a year? What's the timeline on that aspect?
Yeah, so that would have been in 2018 was the first time I went to Thailand, and that was the first Muay Thai camp I went to. And the fight, that particular fighter who kind of jolted me awake to play, that was January 2018. So not too long ago, but yeah, I was already kind of on the journey of discovering what was important in my life.
And you did some of the Thai stuff yourself, was it? You did some Thai boxing yourself as well?
Yeah, I had been doing a little bit of kind of martial arts and boxing before that. And then I went to Thailand specifically to kind of hone it and craft it a little bit more to be able to bring it back to the UK. That was the original idea, to incorporate.
You never made it back, or not yet?
I did make it back kind of on from 2018. Let's just say I never fully moved back to, since I had a play awakening, I never fully moved back to the UK. I went back to the UK, but I kept on leaving again to go play in the world, right? And it was clear, because then I had the word, so I had more substance to this thing that I felt like I was searching for.
I was just going to say, Sinead, we're doing a series of interviews with some guys who are involved in traditional Chinese martial arts, namely Mantis, the Southern Mantis system. Now, always for me, I've felt that one of the key components that was maybe missing from fighting as sport, or for an outcome in terms of winning and making money, fame, all those other aspects from it, are the spiritual aspects, which you've sort of picked up on out of that whole notion of play. I'm not saying that they're missing for everybody who's involved in that side of sort of martial arts for a very specific purpose. But for those who are on a martial journey in terms of life development, maybe spiritual development, certainly ability and all of those other things, but a blend of things rather than specific to an outcome. I'm really intrigued by what you said about noticing that playfulness in somebody else. Was it noticed purely in the fight, or how they conducted themselves? Did you see them pre the fight and post the fight, for example? I'd just like to get more of a flavour around that moment, because it seems quite pivotal to you.
Yes, it was definitely pivotal, and it was all of them, but it became like, so I was picking up on this essence in Thailand to begin with. I went there, when I went to Thailand, I was in a very practical zone. I was very much going there for work and to bring something back from a training perspective. And so it made sense to go to Thailand to learn the deeper, more technical side of Muay Thai. So I wasn't actually, even though I was on my spiritual journey in itself, I was going there for very practical reasons. And as soon as I arrived in Thailand, I was picking up on an essence. Now, I didn't even know I could do that back then, because I was still very much cognitive, analytical. I was an analyst for 15 years in corporate, but I always had this ability. I just wasn't accepting. I had this feeling, sensing ability. So I knew I was picking up on an essence from the Thai surroundings, and I was in a very remote area in Thailand, which is like countryside, so it wasn't touristy. And so I was kind of wondering what this thing was. People are like, oh, Thai people are just happy. I'm like, I think that's a bit of an insult, but anyway, there was an essence, but it was in the fight. It was the fact that he brought this essence that I was already picking up on. He brought it to the performance, and people, and he was just taking people out in a playful way, and then it clicked. So it was already building, and then I seen it in a performance ring. So it was very condensed in these kind of few minutes, where it was very obvious to me. I was like, that is it. And so his mannerisms, the way he moved, the way he responded, the way he approached, the way he actually fought with the whole thing was just playful. And then it became clear. So it needed to be in that kind of, I think sports can be very reflective of life, but it's just a different approach. It's like being able to be quote unquote competitive without seeing the person as an enemy. That's play. So you can see competition in two different ways, and you can see it playing out in courts and fights when people go through that kind of physiological way where they lose the play and then they kind of lose it, or they get too angry, like in a tennis game, and start throwing rackets. So you can see it always play out in these competitive sports. And you'll see the person who retains play holds it together better, because they're not seeing it as an enemy. They're seeing it as a way to have a challenge and learn and evolve and co-regulate through it. And it's a whole different process.
Sinead, it almost seems like what you're saying is that you saw somebody operating on a higher level.
Yes.
Of whether it's be consciousness, of ability, of heart, whatever that may have been, and that struck or that allowed that sense that you'd already had in the exposure to Thailand itself. And maybe that had been something that had been percolating in you for a long time, actually, but it came to fruition, or seemingly that was like a catalyst. And for you, taking from that, Sinead, you've sort of touched on why that resonated so much. How has that sort of maybe grown and developed over the past few years specifically for you? Is there anything now is there anything about you that has really changed in that time that you can vocalize, or is it more a felt experience?
I would say the latter. It's definitely a felt experience, and it's in that things have changed. So leading my life from more of a felt experience and trusting that. So when I was saying about when I even entered Thailand back in 2018, I was still approaching life very much from a cognitive experience, even though what I was doing with myself and with my clients was very much about the body and movement. I still wasn't fully connected to the power of feeling, in which play plays a part kind of symbiotically. And so that was the moment in the beginning of shift of trusting more and feeling more into the feelings. So now my life is very much led by feeling my way forward. It's not that I don't use my mind. I do, but in terms of making decisions, specifically big decisions, like how I ended up in Mexico or why I left the UK just before COVID, they were feeling intuitive decisions. And then I call it kind of the fuck it flow, where I trust that and I play the game of life through that feeling based. So it is both of that, but the beginning to feel that sense of playfulness and play in the game of life, that then led to me being where I am now, where a lot of my decisions are based on the feeling and interpreting that into choices or creativity. And there's a playful aspect to it. So not taking it too seriously, but understanding, there are serious decisions to be made in life, but there is an approach and there is an attitude and there is a way of taking action through that can be playful.
I think this ties in very much to how Gary actually lives his life as well. But before I come on to that, because I think I'd like to almost turn that over to Gary, because I'm sure he'll have some insights around that. How has this because you've gone through, since that moment back in 2018, the world has changed, right? And I don't believe it will ever be the same again. You may or may not, but many of us don't. I just wonder how navigating the other aspects that have come up during our experience across that timeline, how that alteration, whether it's left brain, right brain, spiritual, from the heart, however we choose to frame that, do you think that's made you have a smoother ride than you may otherwise have had, or a different one, or whatever? Anyway, most importantly, do you think it's meant that you navigated it differently from how you might have done had it happened earlier in your life?
In short, yes. And it's interesting because it kind of happened very fast, and it's more of a reflection now. I just trusted these feelings and went with it, and then everything was kind of happening, like the world just went a bit crazy, quite a lot crazy. And it's only now, particularly when I'm having conversations with people, that they reflect it back to me, if that makes sense, because it's very difficult to see yourself.
Absolutely.
What that looks like.
That's the biggest blind spot I believe any of us have, is around ourselves. So
yes, absolutely. Which is where the feeling thing is really helpful, to trust yourself, but you still don't see yourself. And it's very difficult to see how other people see you or your choices, until they start sharing that back with you when you're just having a normal conversation. So it's interesting, particularly since I've been here in Playa del Carmen, a lot of people have arrived here very recently to get away from, a lot of restrictions, but they have gone through the lockdowns and everything, which I didn't go through. And so in those conversations, without not thinking it through, that I navigated differently. I just know my experience was different. And in those conversations, repeatedly, people are like, you've navigated this not like anyone else I've heard. And so that's been fed back to me. And then I've started to like, oh, yeah, you're right. I don't know anyone that I don't know many people that navigated it the way that I did. I've started to come across them now. We're now kind of weirdly finding each other. Yeah. But in conversations, particularly these last few months of people here in player, they're like, okay, that's a really interesting way that you've navigated it. Can you share with me how you've done that? And I'm like, it was feeling based. And like you said, there was bits and pieces that I was working on consciously and unconsciously to lead me to a place where I just trust my gut feeling, even though it makes no sense. Like it can seem irrational. And then the more I've done that, the more confident I've got doing it.
Yeah,
and now
it's a beautiful thing, actually.
Oh yeah, my life is very different throughout the COVID issue.
Time. Gary, just because you are much far more intuitive probably than I am, and because I think that there is some real there are some real synergies between your experience and Sinead's. Do you have any insight or questions around your own experience?
Well, it's not really insights, because it just obviously a lot of what Sinead's saying resonates with me in this way. But really, I'd like to ask, is it easy for you to define what you mean by play? Is it more, like you're saying, just a way of living, as in not taking things too seriously, or it has physical aspects as well that we would like traditionally, I don't know, like playing a game sort of thing, a physical type thing? Or is it really just that feeling of, like you said, like moving and taking notes of things and a little bit more laid back about stuff? Yeah.
I would say it's all of those things, and that's in itself has taken me a while to not work out but explore, because initially when I was understanding what play was, it was very much I was seeing it in the movement aspect and how that can play out in performance and that higher level of performance, which you could call the play zone. But actually it is all of it. So it is an attitude, like a playful attitude, and it's a playful approach to life, or seeing life and your choices as playing the game of life. So it kind of comes from all of these aspects. And for me, it's very helpful. Do you guys know about what's called the dreaded drama triangle?
I don't think I do.
Probably not by name. I might have lived through one or more.
Yeah.
Sounds of it, yeah.
Like the world that we live in is very much set up so that what's called the dreaded drama, and I can send you a picture of it, you get a visual of it. Yeah, but it's got it here. So it's the persecutor, rescuer, and victim, and that's called the dreaded drama triangle. So that we very easily get caught up in that, particularly in today's world, because it's very fear-based. And so, people are either playing the persecutor or the rescuer or the victim, and it just gets stuck in that triangle. And the other triangle is called the TED triangle, which is the empowerment triangle. And for me, I see play as the bridge between the two. It's like, it's very easy to see these triangles and cognitively understand that I don't want to be in the drama triangle, because you're stuck in there playing one of those roles or perhaps all of those roles. But how do you move to the empowerment triangle, which then you've got the challenger, the coach, and the creator being the ultimate, tip of the triangle, of the opposite triangle, where you are creating your life through different aspects. And for me, play is the bridge in terms of how you approach things differently. And then actually using play from an action point of view is then how you become to be a creator, either through imagination, through curiosity, through authenticity. All of these different aspects and values and qualities then start to come together so that you're the creator of the game of life. So then you're truly playing. So creator being like you're creating something out of nothing, as opposed to working in the known world. So that's kind of how that's a very long-winded answer, but it very much plays into empowerment, like moving out of disempowerment to empowerment, that play has a bridge, and then it has a very important role to play in terms of the actions that you take, the approach, the attitude, and the action from a playful perspective.
Sinead, can I just ask, are there specific modalities that come out, particularly the second triangle? Because as per human nature, I like to quickly forget about the first one and look at the second one, which is the fun one and the spark that we all have as human beings. You know, this thing of being creative and ultimately maybe even more than just as human beings. But do you think that if we can reconvene at some point, because I think we've scratched the surface of something that is a wonderful area that is very needed and necessary in the current world and climate, for me at least. I don't want to speak on behalf of others, but I feel that. Do you think that we could look at spending some time together on another one of these podcasts where we actually look at specific things that people might even look to do or to feel or to promote in themselves that might switch them either more into that second triangle or enable them to go through certain stages that at least they can see where they might be currently? Because for me, that seems like a fairly easy shift. Yeah, I'm a creator being because I'm already quite creative. For a lot of people, actually, that might be a really tough journey to move and navigate on those triangles.
Yeah, I totally agree. In answer to your question, absolutely, I'd love to do that. And yes, it can be very tough, particularly if you're, you know, one of the dominating forces, shall we say, when you're in the dreaded drama triangle is fear. So telling someone not to be fearful, that doesn't work, right? You're talking about physiology, you're talking about psyche, and you're talking about, well, how do I play? And so those are the three. Again, the power of three is very important to me. So from many different aspects, you'll see it repeated through life in terms of the three, like the Triskelion or the Trinity. And so the triangle, the dreaded triangle is three, and the empowerment triangle is three. And so for me personally, developing a way that addresses those three so that you can move one to the other is exactly what I'm working now with clients. And those are the practical tools to be the bridge. And then also, how can we work in these areas? And sometimes, like a lot of it is symbiotic, but you can break it down so that you can see which one is dominant in each area to connect to that creative force again, because creativity is part of it, but what we're actually talking about is the creator life force, and that to me is aliveness. So you've got survival, you've got thrival. I mean, and most people, you know, just to get to feeling like you're thriving is amazing, but there is, you could call it another level of awareness, and that's that aliveness. Okay. And so that's the area that for me play brings.
Well, you could be very busy soon, because it seems like the whole collective is being asked to switch from one triangle to the other. So
yeah, they're being squeezed. Everyone's being, if you're in that dreaded drama triangle, you're being squeezed. So you will be aware that you're in it, but you might not be aware of what it is. But
well, look, let's try to look at another timing where we can look at what that escape hatch might look like, how to recognize where you are at the moment, and then look at those modalities in all their different variances. Because I think that would be, I think, again, I love the fact you keep on using the bridge analogy, because of course the quantum bridge as well, we have that in common. And I think making that bridge and not being judgmental is fundamental to what we're all trying, yourself included, Sinead. Look, for now, I know that we're about to get cut off. So thank you very much for joining us, Sinead. That was really lovely. But I hope it's the first of many.
Thank you, guys. Speak to you soon.
Yeah, speak to you soon.
Bye.
And, from us at Quantum Bridge, bye-bye.